Donald Trump is sending millions of China back home 2025-inch. In 2025, one of the most controversial decisions in modern American history could rock the global stage. Imagine this. Millions of Chinese nationals currently living and working in the U.S. being forced to leave and return to China. It's not a hypothetical. It's what Donald Trump has proposed in a bold and shocking move that could reshape not just U.S.-China relations, but the entire global order. Why is this happening? Trump's approach to China and immigration has always been aggressive, but now this drastic action could send shockwaves through economies, tech industries, and even families. This is more than just about deportation. It's about power, geopolitics, and the future of American diplomacy. In this video, we'll break down the critical details of this controversial move. What led to this decision, and why is Trump doubling down on this now? We'll look at the immediate effects this will have on millions of Chinese nationals living in America, the economic impact on both the U.S. and China, and the diplomatic fallout that's sure to follow. Stick around as we dive into how this could change the course of U.S.-China relations and what the future might look like for both countries. You don't want to miss how this bold strategy might play out in 2025 and beyond. U.S.-China relations before 2025. Before 2025, U.S.-China relations had become increasingly strained, with trade wars and tariffs becoming the hallmark of the economic relationship between the two superpowers. Over the years, the U.S. had imposed hefty tariffs on Chinese goods, citing unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and an unbalanced trade deficit. In return, China retaliated with its own tariffs, leading to a tit-for-tat battle that rocked global markets. This growing tension wasn't just about trade. It became a symbol of a broader ideological struggle for dominance in the 21st century. The political tensions were not just limited to economics. They bled into international diplomacy, particularly with issues surrounding Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the South China Sea. The U.S. government consistently called out China for its human rights violations, its actions in the Hong Kong protests, and its militarization of the South China Sea. Meanwhile, China viewed U.S. involvement in its domestic affairs as interference, and the relationship between the two was defined by mistrust and growing rivalry. In this environment, Donald Trump had taken a firm stance during his presidency, prioritizing America's interests above all else. Trump's America First policy meant a hardline approach to China, where he pushed for an economic decoupling, aiming to reduce the U.S.'s dependence on Chinese manufacturing. Trump's previous administration focused on restricting Chinese tech companies like Huawei and TikTok, citing national security risks, and even launching a trade war to curtail China's rising influence. By the end of his presidency, U.S.-China relations were at one of their lowest points in decades. Fast forward to 2025, Trump's new policy, sending millions of Chinese nationals back to China, appears to be a natural progression of his prior rhetoric and strategies. This dramatic move could be seen as his latest effort to sever U.S. dependence on China, this time targeting the large number of Chinese nationals living, working, and studying in the U.S. The policy not only represents an escalation of the trade war, but signals a shift toward more direct action in tackling what Trump sees as an existential threat to American dominance. The policy announcement. The announcement that Trump plans to send millions of Chinese nationals back home in 2025 is nothing short of audacious. The policy is rooted in Trump's belief that China's increasing influence in the U.S., through investments, technology companies, and its vast network of nationals, poses a direct threat to American security and sovereignty. According to Trump, these individuals could be working as economic spies, manipulating American industries, or even undermining U.S. policies on behalf of Beijing. In a statement from the Trump administration, The reasoning behind the move was framed around the need to reclaim American jobs and industries from foreign influence and restore integrity to America's borders. Trump's rhetoric heavily emphasized national security concerns, with many of the deportations aimed at Chinese nationals working in sensitive sectors like technology, academia, and research. His administration argued that these individuals posed a threat to intellectual property and national security, citing examples of espionage accusations in the past. From a logistical standpoint, the policy would involve a mix of increased immigration enforcement, tighter visa restrictions, and more aggressive deportation processes for Chinese nationals who fail to meet the newly outlined criteria for remaining in the U.S. Legal experts warn, however, that this would face significant hurdles, including lawsuits from both individuals and advocacy groups concerned about potential violations of human rights and constitutional rights. Critics argue that such a sweeping policy could lead to mass deportations based on racial profiling, targeting Chinese nationals indiscriminately, regardless of their ties to the Chinese government. Furthermore, the diplomatic fallout could be monumental. Sending millions of Chinese nationals back to their home country would not only sour U.S.-China relations further, but could also disrupt global business operations, especially within the tech and educational sectors, both of which rely heavily on Chinese expertise and students. China, for its part, could retaliate in ways that affect U.S. businesses, particularly those reliant on the Chinese market, and could even trigger global economic disruptions. The impact on Chinese nationals in the U.S. For Chinese nationals living in the U.S., the announcement of this policy has caused shockwaves through communities that have built lives, businesses, and careers in America. There are significant implications for different groups within the Chinese diaspora, each of which will face unique challenges. For students, many of whom are pursuing higher education in fields like technology, medicine, and business, this policy could mean the end of their American dream. Thousands of Chinese students studying in the U.S. could find themselves suddenly facing deportation, jeopardizing years of academic progress, and potentially leaving them stranded without the support of family in the U.S. For workers, especially those in the tech industry, which has a substantial Chinese presence, this policy could disrupt the careers of thousands of highly skilled professionals. Companies like Tesla, Apple, and Google rely on a diverse workforce, including many talented Chinese nationals. The policy could lead to a brain drain in the tech sector, forcing companies to either relocate their operations or face talent shortages. Business owners, many of whom have invested heavily in the U.S. economy, would also face significant financial strain. They would have to either close their businesses or navigate complex legal challenges to keep their businesses running with a reduced workforce. The emotional and financial toll on these individuals could be profound, as many have established deep roots in their local communities. The policy could also have lasting effects on families. Chinese immigrants who have made a life in the U.S. could be forced to leave behind spouses, children, and extended family members, creating significant emotional turmoil and financial hardship. For those with American-born children, the policy could present legal complications, as they would have to navigate difficult decisions regarding family reunification. The community response within the U.S. has been mixed, with protests, legal challenges, and political backlash already forming. While some may support the policy for its national security focus, many Chinese nationals, immigrant advocacy groups, and human rights organizations are deeply concerned about the racial and economic implications of such an action. The emotional impact, particularly on families and businesses that have contributed to the American economy for years, cannot be overstated. Economic and political ramifications for the U.S. The economic impact of sending millions of Chinese nationals back to China in 2025 could be profound. The immediate effect would be the loss of a significant portion of the U.S. workforce, particularly in industries that rely heavily on skilled labor. Chinese nationals make up a large segment of the STEM fields, with many working as engineers, researchers, and tech professionals. Silicon Valley alone is home to thousands of Chinese nationals who contribute to the innovation and development of some of the most important technologies today. Their departure could lead to a severe talent shortage, one that would be difficult to replace in the short term. In addition to the tech sector, universities across the U.S. would also suffer. Chinese students comprise a large percentage of international students, particularly in fields like engineering, business, and sciences. If these students are forced to leave, American universities could face a significant decline in both enrollment and research capabilities, potentially losing billions in international student fees. Moreover, businesses that rely on Chinese nationals, whether in retail, technology, or finance, could see disruptions in operations. Companies would either need to replace these workers or risk slowing down production, innovation, and customer service. The cost of replacement workers could skyrocket as demand for skilled labor intensifies. While Trump may argue that this move will create job openings for American citizens, it's unclear whether these positions can be filled as quickly or if U.S. workers have the same skill sets. Politically, the policy could have serious consequences for U.S.-China trade relations. China is a major trading partner for the U.S., and sending millions of its nationals back could be perceived as a direct attack on China. Trade tensions, already high, could escalate into full-blown trade wars, with China retaliating by imposing tariffs or targeting American companies operating in China. Trump's move could be part of a broader strategy to pressure China into more favorable trade agreements, though this is speculative at best. The economic repercussions would likely be felt by American businesses, consumers, and workers alike, and Trump might see this as leverage in future trade negotiations, hoping to strengthen America's position. China's response and diplomacy. China is likely to react strongly to Trump's policy, as this could be seen as an affront to its national dignity and sovereignty. Diplomatic protests would be inevitable, with the Chinese government likely condemning the decision as a violation of international norms and human rights. Retaliatory actions could come in the form of sanctions, trade restrictions, or even targeting U.S. businesses operating in China. China could also impose travel bans on American nationals, making it more difficult for Americans to engage in business or diplomacy in China. Beyond the immediate diplomatic fallout, this policy could shift the Chinese population's view of the U.S. While many Chinese nationals may already be wary of the U.S. due to ongoing political tensions, the deportation policy could deepen these concerns. For Chinese citizens living in the U.S., this policy would be a bitter blow, further solidifying negative perceptions of the U.S. as a country that does not welcome them. This could also push China into a more aggressive stance in global politics and trade. Feeling the need to defend its interests, China might seek to align more closely with other rising powers, such as Russia, and explore new trade partnerships with countries outside of the U.S. sphere of influence. As China strengthens its global presence, the U.S. could find itself increasingly isolated. The strategic geopolitical landscape could shift dramatically as China pushes for more influence in international organizations, while the U.S. becomes more entrenched in protectionism. Reactions from the American public and politicians. Reactions to Trump's policy will likely be polarized, with political parties sharply divided on the issue. Supporters of the policy, mainly from Trump's base, would argue that the move is necessary for national security and economic protectionism. They would view it as a way to reduce China's influence in the U.S. and protect American jobs, particularly in industries where Chinese nationals have a significant presence. These supporters would likely see the deportation as a necessary step to preserve American sovereignty and ensure that the U.S. does not become overly reliant on Chinese nationals in critical sectors like technology, academia, and business. Opponents, however, would push back strongly, labeling the policy as xenophobic and discriminatory. Critics would argue that it unfairly targets individuals based on their nationality, not their actions, and that it could lead to racial profiling and human rights violations. Many would also raise concerns about the economic consequences, fearing that sending millions of highly skilled workers and students back to China would leave the U.S. with a talent gap, especially in tech and academia. These opponents could include both Democrats and Republicans who feel that the policy is overly punitive and harmful to the nation's global standing. Public opinion on the policy would be deeply divided, with polling likely showing strong support among Trump's base, but significant opposition from more liberal or centrist voters. This division would also play out in the 2025 election cycle, as Trump's stance on China could either rally his supporters or alienate moderate voters who are concerned about the long-term consequences of such a policy. The debate over immigration and trade could become a key issue in the election, with candidates from both sides of the political spectrum offering starkly different visions for U.S.-China relations. The broader global impact. On a global scale, Trump's policy could have far-reaching consequences for international relations and global economics. Countries around the world that have large Chinese populations or strong economic ties with China could see this as a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy. Nations like Canada, Australia, and the UK might face pressure to reconsider their own policies toward Chinese nationals, as they weigh the possibility of similar actions being taken by the U.S.-China, as the world's second-largest economy, plays a significant role in global trade and geopolitics. The deportation policy could lead to shifts in global alliances as countries reassess their relationships with the U.S. and China. Countries that rely on trade with China, or that have large Chinese expatriate populations, might start moving closer to China politically or economically, potentially at the expense of their relationships with the U.S. Additionally, nations with significant Chinese populations, such as Malaysia and Singapore, may have to navigate the complexities of this new geopolitical reality. These countries could find themselves in a delicate balancing act, trying to maintain good relations with both China and the U.S. The broader international community would be watching closely, as Trump's policy could set a precedent for how countries treat foreign nationals and deal with diplomatic tensions in the future. What's next? The future of U.S.-China relations post-2025. Looking ahead to 2025 and beyond, the future of U.S.-China relations will likely be defined by this policy. Whether it leads to further isolation of China or opens the door for future negotiations is still uncertain. While Trump may view this as a necessary step to reduce China's influence in the U.S., it could provoke a response that drives both countries deeper into their ideological corners. The fallout could lead to a realignment in global politics, with China increasingly seeking to build new alliances with other emerging powers, while the U.S. focuses on strengthening its own economic position. However, Trump may face significant challenges in implementing this policy effectively. Legal battles, international backlash, and logistical hurdles will make the deportation process complicated and contentious. Additionally, the diplomatic and economic fallout could be difficult to manage, particularly if U.S. businesses and workers are negatively affected. In summary, Trump's bold proposal to send millions of Chinese nationals back to China is a major turning point in U.S.-China relations. This policy has the potential to reshape the global economic landscape and alter the balance of power between two of the world's largest economies. Whether it strengthens the U.S. or exacerbates tensions remains to be seen, but it is clear that this will have lasting implications for international diplomacy, trade, and immigration policies. So, what do you think about Trump's policy on China? Is this a bold move to protect American interests, or will it only serve to escalate tensions and damage global relations? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on this evolving situation.